Welcome to the Real Estate All Day podcast, where we unpack the latest tips, tricks, and tactics that move the needle in your real estate business and unpack the stories behind the agents that are buying and selling real estate in your market today.
So I wanted to introduce myself. Thank you guys for joining. My name is Eric Meldrum, and today we're putting on a training that I'm really excited about, and just a little bit of background about myself. I've been in the business for years. I am out of Brighton, Michigan. We cover really Livingston County, Washtenaw County in the Metro Detroit area. Previously to real estate, I managed supply chain operations, flew all around the world, setting up logistics centers, got really burnt out, and decided that real estate is a better avenue to manage my time. Little did I know that real estate takes hold of you, and you are just along for the ride, to say the least, until you can get a hold of it. So we finally got a hold of our business, and things are going great. So we've partnered up with a lot of people here. I want to introduce, my partner Chris Raynor here in a second. But we're really big on education, right, in our group. So we're giving this training today to you guys, that are looking for, to refresh on listing presentation. And in today's market, this is exactly what we need to be focused on, is listings. All right? I don't know about you guys, but I don't know how many more buyers I can take around, to make 20 offers to get one accepted and showing all those homes. Listings are really going to change, somebody's business if they can focus on them. So without further ado, I want to introduce Chris Raynor. I'll give a brief introduction. His accolades are probably on 2 pages for what we can do. But Chris Raynor is a coach. He's a trainer. He's a mentor. He's been in the business 18 years out of Las Vegas or Nevada and California, licensed in both states. He's just a wealth of knowledge. Chris, welcome, man.
Thank you. How's everybody doing? So I'm pretty interactive, so I'm going to have you guys jump in and interact, talk. We are going to do a Q&A, so if you have questions, put it in the chat. We're going to go through all of that towards the end, and we want to help you out. So I'm going to go through my personal listing presentation that I use. So I can't hit my entire presentation of everything we do, from the sidewalk to the listing presentation to the actual listing agreement, but we can go through the presentation portion today, and I want to help kind of break this down for you. So to give you a little background, I cut my teeth in lending in California. That's where I got my start. And then in 2010, I jumped over to the dark side, and I've been over here very happily ever since. And so work most of Northern California, Lake Tahoe region, and have done some stuff in Las Vegas, and also am positioned up here in Reno, Nevada. So my listing presentation has come through years of being coached myself by the one and only Haas Pratt, and took me through all the Listing Boss Academy. I now coach for him. And so a lot of this has some roots and founding in NLP. And so I want to cover a couple of pieces here that I think are very important for you to watch, and that is, have a high level of congruency in everything you say, everything you present, and all of your marketing pieces. If any one of those are disjointed, it becomes a problem. The other aspect of this that we have to do is we have to be able to build a high level of authority. And we build a high level of authority by selling our solutions, not us as people. And we do that through question-based selling. So the other aspect of this is I would tell you, you should know your listing presentation inside and out. I could quote this entire presentation verbatim. That's important to do so that you're not sitting there thinking about what you're going to be saying. As you move through this presentation, you want to own this thing, because that confidence is going to come through. And so aspects of this is, towards the end of this listing presentation, you have to be able to articulate your value to the client. Any value not articulated is a value not appreciated. So we have to be careful to stay out of the realms of ego and to make it sound like we're bragging, but we have to be able to articulate it, because in the absence of value, the only solution I have to get the listing over the next is to start lowering commissions. That's not something I'm in business to do. I've been at this almost 2 decades. I plan on retaining my 6%. The other angle of this that I would tell you to do is be able to know this inside and out, but be able to fluctuate or flow with this by knowing your disc profiles. I have one question I ask every new prospect, and the way they answer it tells me which 2 of the 4 personality types they are, and one more question tells me exactly who I'm dealing with. And that's important to know, because if you're dealing with a high C personality, you have to approach that different than you would a high D personality. Does that make sense? Raise your hand if that makes sense. All right, good. So let's jump into this, and we're going to talk about how to master the presentation. So the things that we have to accomplish as we're going through our presentation is we have to break down their defenses, right? Because sellers have a lot of questions. Sellers also have a level of reservation about them because they want to know what you're here to try to sell them on. So one of the things I do right away is just take that away immediately. The second thing you must do is know their why. And then learn to master what's called pattern disrupt, meaning most sellers know where they've started and where they plan on ending up. And if I don't know how to break that pattern in their thought process, they will control the conversation versus us helping them get to where they want to go. And then I like to use what we call future pacing. And then it's important to wrap this up with social proof, and then just simply assume the sale. So what are the questions that all sellers ask? They all want to know, how much do you charge? That usually is a question that comes out right at the first part of the conversation. And most of the time it'll even pop up on the phone call. And there's a way to handle that and get in the front door and still retain your 6%. The next question they have is, what's my home worth? Then they're going to want to know, what are you going to do different from the next agent to get their property sold? And then they are measuring you up. They want to know if you're trustworthy and competent. And so here is my listing presentation. The very first thing I do is I always tell them, thank you for taking time out to talk with me. Let me tell you what's going to happen today, Mr. Seller. One of 3 things is going to happen. 1, you're going to decide you want to list with me. 2, you're going to decide at the end of the day, you don't want to list with me, but here's one thing I can promise you. You will be smarter for meeting with me. Or 3, I'm going to decide at the end of this conversation that I don't want to list your property. Now, I actually mean this, and you have to be able to say it with that level of confidence, because I don't list houses that are way too high. 99% of my business portfolio for the last several years is all listings. I will retain, and I collect about 40 plus referrals a year, plus whatever I generate over the top of that. I don't have time that I want to waste on listings that are going to go nowhere. So when I get challenged on that, I'll tell them there's 2 things, and this is just kind of my joke with them is there's 2 things I look for. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you're interviewing me to see if you think I can do a good job for you. But let me tell you what, I'm also interviewing you to see if I can get along with you. Of course, you smile and make a joke out of it. And then 2, I will come back in and go, the next most important thing is, are we on the same page value-wise? And I'll even go through and explain some stuff there. So from this point, I always train and teach on how to do question-based selling. This is very, very important. So the first thing that people will respond with is what we call an atomic response. It's like asking every one of you, how you doing today? I'm going to get fine. I'm doing okay. Things are all right. But then if I drive deep and I start to drive deeper on that question, it's not till the third or fourth question with this that I ever truly know what's going on with people. I just did this with a lady sitting in Starbucks. I didn't know anything about her. And I started driving deep. The very first answer she gave me was, it's all about the price. Every seller in the country is probably going to say that. By the time I got 4 levels deep on this question, this lady was sitting in Starbucks with tears running down her face, talking about her kids and why that price was so important. Now I have her why. But it's not until I learn to articulate questions the right way that I can ever get to that why. Because the average agent, and 90% of them are all going to go in saying the same thing, showing the same comps, and doing the same thing. There's nothing to differentiate them from the very next agents that's coming through. I regularly interview against 10 other agents and walk out with listing agreements because of this stuff. It's super important to learn how to master this. And so we simply ask them from a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not so desirable and a level 10, what do I have to do to make this a level 10 for you? And then I will drive this question down a little deeper, and I may ask it different ways based on who's in front of me, but I'm going to go deeper on there. And usually the first response is always price, or it's this or that. And then as I drive deeper, they start opening up, and I like to ask a lot of open-ended questions. So I will go through this with them. And by the time I get to the 4th question on this, I'll have their true why. Now, the next page is all about them still. So what I did is I took the defense down on page 1 by saying, I may or may not list your property. Well, that takes the pressure out for them, and it brings those walls down. So now they really want to talk. And then it becomes all about them. Zig Ziglar had a great saying that was, you can get anything you want if you help enough people get what they want. And that's really why this is designed this way. It's to get in their head first and foremost before I tell them why I'm the solution. And so I go through and I ask these questions. I says, name 5 things that will cause me to win with you. You should see some congruency between this and the page prior, because it should confirm what they were saying. Now I'll ask them, what's 5 ways that I could lose with you? And 90% of the time they will come out and they'll start telling me what the last agent didn't do and what they promised. Right? So those are things that I'm always going to do. And so then I will say, what do you feel like you have the right to expect from me as your real estate consultant? Now that's important to me, because now I'm figuring out what is their expectation. If I don't have this data, there is no way to make clients happy, no matter what I do, because maybe I was never connected to their real reason for selling. Then I like to flip the script, because again, I started on page 1 going, I'm interviewing you also. And then I will ask them, what do you feel like I have the right to expect from you as my client? And it's a question no agent will ask typically. I don't know very many that will turn around and ask that question, but I want to make sure they've got proper expectations for what they're supposed to do with having the house ready, with can I call you and get showings in, and so forth. You know, there's been some of these that have answered this question right here. I've decided right then and there, I'm not the agent for them. So I'll start wrapping things up and kind of walk out. So the next thing I do is, again, it's coming back down to this being able to articulate the value And let's just do a poll. Put it in the chat right now. How many of you are on a team? Let's see what everybody comes back with. Oh, we got a lot of teams. So let's go back to Dee and Gail and Cooper. You guys actually do have a team. And here's why. You have lenders, you have escrow officers, you have brokers, you have maybe mentors and coaches. Like, you have a team. And this is one way to kind of seal the deal for you by shifting that and changing it. I have a team now, although I don't run a team. I had my own brokerage in both states. And about 3 years ago, I rolled my brokerage into EXP. I'm here. I still have a team because I still have all these people in my background. And so for California, and it's pretty close to that in Nevada, there's 192 steps to every transactions. We have over 200 pages of disclosure for the typical residential property. So I know a lot of you in different states, you'll have 10, 15, 20, but we talk about how much stuff's involved, because every seller I've ever talked to does not have a clear description of what we really do. Why is this important? Because they don't really know what we do. We just think they think we're expensive paper pushers. Why do you think for sale by owners try to do what they do? That's because they don't understand what we actually do. And so we can talk about this. So I'm the team lead for my team of one, but we have people who call. We have an online marketing team. We have dedicated buyer and seller teams. I've got agents all over town I can team up with anywhere. I've got an agent I consistently work with out of Las Vegas. He's 400 miles from me, but we do a lot of commercial stuff together. So you might be your own dedicated, and you can change this up and do whatever, but it's important to talk about this, because when we talk about 192 tasks, we want them to know that there's more than one set of eyeballs on this, which there will always be. So the other thing that we do is if you ask the average agent when they go in there and when they're talking to the seller, what are you going to do to sell my house? Well, we're going to put it on the MLS. We'll put it on Zillow. We'll put a sign out front. Most of them can't articulate what they're doing. So when we come in, well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we have a 89-point marketing plan that's designed to sell your house for the most amount of money in half the time of the average agent, right? You see how that sounds different? And it doesn't matter if it's 89, 49, 29. I have a friend of mine, she's in Southern Texas. She moved from a school teacher, became the top listing agent in her market within 2 years. She actually shrunk this down to 29. So it's important to end that number with a 9 or 7. We can talk about that later, but it's important to have this because it sounds very direct, very punctual, and it shows that you thought this out and that you actually have a plan. That's what sellers want to know. Do you have a plan that's really going to get this done, or are you going to throw it on the market and pray like every other agent? So you got to have something in here. And I've never had a seller yet stop and read through this. They just want to know that we're going to do something for them. And I could articulate all this. And then I bring out the stat. According to the 2020 home buyer profile compiled by the National Association of Realtors, over 93% of home buyers begin their home search online. Well, what am I doing? I'm future pacing them. I'm getting ready to tell them how we put every listing on hundreds of sites, right? You pull any one of my listings about 4 to 5 days afterwards, it is on pages and pages and pages of Google. So we have a syndication process. What does this mean? Well, it gives me a chance to talk about, as we're going to lead into, how much marketing we do. So a lot of you can probably see this belt back here. That's an International Real Estate Marketing Award. And I will still tell sellers that marketing will go out and position your property in front of all of the potential buyers that there is. It's not going to sell the home, but it will create a lot of traffic and it will create a lot of attention to it, hopefully to generate multiple offers, which is where I would go back in and negotiate. But we talk about that. When you list with us, our listing syndication system is going to put it on hundreds of websites. It's not uncommon for me to get 100,000 impressions on every listing. But you got to have a solution. This is what sellers want to see, is that you've got a plan. You've got something that you're going to work from. The next conversation we have is we talk about the telemarketing team. Whoever said the phone was no longer valuable, we work to put 100 phone calls a day in, 5 days a week. What are we doing, Mr. Seller? We're looking for buyers actively. We're not just putting it on the market, hoping they show up and praying that agents find it. Guess what? Through our marketing and through our phone calls, we're positioning this property directly in front of the actual buyers. We're not waiting on that. So then we will continue to proceed through this and we'll talk about pricing misconceptions. So this is a big one. We set them up, we let them know how much marketing we're going to do. And one of the statements that I will make to every seller is, now here's the most important thing. Pricing always sells the house. If I have a $500,000 property here in Reno, I will commonly pitch it of, if I list your house for $300,000, when should it be sold? They always say tonight. Great. What happens if I try to list that house at $800,000? When do you think it'll sell? Well, it won't. That's right, because the market actually sets this number, right? And so it's very important to know your property and how to be positioned competitively on the market, because sellers, when the house is listed too high, it just sits there. NAR actually did some statistics on this, and they determined that if a house is on the market but not getting any showings, it's about 10% too high. If it's getting a lot of showings, but it's not getting offers, then it's about 3 to 5% too high. So I just listed one in Central California. We listed at 458. Within 4 days, I had 7 offers on it, and I negotiated it all the way up to 495. We got $45 extra $1,000 out of that property because we went on the market correctly. So I want you to understand, Mr. Seller, what you paid for that property doesn't matter. What you feel like you need out of it doesn't change where the market is. What you want out of it still doesn't affect the market perception. What your neighbor thinks it's worth. And I sometimes I'll have fun with that, and I'll say, if they really think it's worth that, tell them to get their checkbook out. We'll sell it right now. Or what another agent says, because Mr. Seller, you got to understand, most sellers will tell you what you want to hear. I'm never going to do that. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear to get your property actually sold. And so we'll go through there. We talk about buyers and sellers on the open market, and that's what the property actually will go for. And so the next portion of this is we go back in and we talk about sellers and buyer markets, right? So it's important for them to understand that when you're in a seller's market, things are appreciating. We can list towards the top of the range and still get a lot of traffic, because within a month, it'll be higher. And so it's okay to put that in there and then allow me to negotiate. But what happens when, in California, we're starting to see a lot of volatility. Where California goes, most of the nation goes, and we're starting to see kind of back and forth with this. So we have this conversation. What happens in a buyer's market? Well, Mr. Seller, if I've got 5 properties and they're all just like each other, and you're the highest one on the market and the other 4 are low, guess what buyers are thinking? They're not realistic. They don't want to sell. So we have to do this, because I've watched people in the past, especially through 2007, 8, and 9, they were chasing the market every single month. It would have behooved them greatly to go in and list 20,000 lower, sell the property, retain their equity versus trying to chase that market down every month. So here's why it's so important to be priced correctly. Right? So what are we doing? We're getting them in position to look at where they have to be in order to actually sell their price, because this is usually the number one objection that we have to overcome with sellers, because most sellers never are realistic about the price they want for their house. So we're positioning in a way to know if we're going to have something here that we can work with or not. So we want to talk about this aspect because there's 3 slides here that we go through on ours, and it's talking about the right price. It's time on market always works against you, right? If you want to compete, you got to be competitively priced. So the buying market has a short span, and we want to emphasize these points so that sellers will start to go. There's what's called in NLP induced confusion. And it's where we get people out of their own head and what they think is going on to give them facts to show them that, listen, there's more going on behind the scenes than you realize. And then we help bring them back out of that induced confusion through a solution. So we're talking about pricing the home right the first time is key. If you don't price it, there's always a stigma with properties that sit on markets too long. Proper pricing will always attract buyers. I can sell any property in any market, I promise. It all comes down to price. And so, and then we talk about how overpriced houses will not sell. And if you want to generate market or offers on this market before we're sitting on there too long, because we've all heard it from buyers, especially if something sat on the market 4 to 6 months in the last couple of years. First thing out of the buyer's mouth is, what's wrong with it? And so we want to help frame that for the seller so that they understand, like, listen, we don't want to ever be the one having that conversation, because people that even question that write low offers. We have to get it on and get it on the right way. And then we're going to talk about condition versus pricing it correctly. So a lot of people will take a house that's 100 square feet or 200 square feet off, and they're going to go, well, I'm worth just as much. Well, they put 100 grand worth of upgrades into their property, and yours is in original condition. Appraisers aren't going to see it that way. So we want to talk about comps versus condition. Now, here's the big one. This is the part where we talk and we really drive down on the first 30 days are super critical. And I would tend to say the first 3 weeks are super critical, because a property generates the most traction up front. Unless you're constantly revisiting marketing and repushing new ads, there's a natural synergy that takes place when your house is on the market. But the way that we explain to the sellers is, the longer your property sits on there, more and more houses are coming on the market. That's what's going to grab the buyer's attention. So we have to be priced correctly to generate a lot of traffic now, right? Starting too high and trying to drop the price later misses this enthusiasm. It fails to generate that massive traffic up front. And so we want to drive this point home to do this. So then we will go from here, because at this point, I've been with them probably about 30 minutes. We've talked through this process. They're either on the same page with us on value or not, and it's fine. If they want more, they can try listing it with somebody else. I might go 1-2% above market. I won't ever list anything over that personally, but I have about a 99% sales rate. I've only 18 years in the business. I've only lost 7 houses the entire time I've been in this business. If I get a listing, I get it sold. And typically my averages on every listing are above 100% on list versus sales price. So it's important to help people understand that. You have to truly believe this and be confident in being able to tell your sellers this, because if there's any hesitation in you, they're going to know it. And so we go through, we show them how to prepare the home for sale. And then to seal the deal, we're going to talk about social proof, right? So it's important that you're not bragging on yourself. It's important to have your clients brag on you, right? So we talk about this. So this testimonial on the left-hand side, and I have this hyperlinked. I do this on my computer so I can pull up my website. But this client on the left was a former police officer out of Central California in Stockton. He had it listed with a major box franchise, and then he went to another local guy that was there. And I came in, there were 8 of us that were interviewing for this. So he had it listed 9.5 months, and he only had about 10 showings. So they were just all over the map. The last guy was one of these low brokerage, throw it on the MLS, do nothing brokers. And when I went in and I looked at the property, he was listed at 380. I says, I think I can actually get you 395. He thought I was nuts, because he's like, you're going to raise the price after being on the market this long? I says, just let my marketing do what it is. I had 20 showings in 2 weeks. We sold it for full price. He was so ecstatic with me, actually had me go over and help him purchase a property out of Oakland, California. And so I ended up with 2 transactions out of, and this was an old expired lead, by the way. And so it's this important to be able to articulate this stuff. If you go to my testimonial page on my website, the top of it actually has Ken Shamrock, the UFC fighter. He's a friend of mine. I got to sell his house, and then it's just followed up by about 20 more testimonials that look just like this. And so it's important to go through, pick your 2 or 3 best ones, have that in there, let them seal the deal. And then we come back in and we offer a communication guarantee. And we simply tell the sellers, listen, at any point I don't communicate with you every single week, you have the right to fire me. Right? Why? Because sellers want to know that you're there for them, you're fighting for them. They want to know that you're there to do something and to help them. Most agents interview on a level 10 and deliver at a level 3. We've probably all seen it in different markets. And sellers just want to know you're really there. They want to know that you're going to fulfill what you said you're going to do. And it's very important to be very intentional about that, is to make sure that you're doing everything. But this should put a fire under your butt to communicate with your sellers. And a couple of things that I've noticed, and this is something that we intentionally do, is I make sure to talk every single week at least once, if not twice. Because outside of this transaction, I'll collect 40 referrals this year just simply for breathing. How many of you on the call here do 40 transactions a year? Let's see. Put it in the chat for me. Anybody? This is how I have generated my business, and it's a predominantly referral based. And so it's by being able to articulate this and cover the questions that sellers have before they even ask. That's how you build a high level of trust. We all know that every buyer has the same 4 or 5 questions. Every seller has the same 4 or 5 concerns. NAR does research week or year after year. The same 2 complaints are at the top of the list every single year. It's communication and performance. My agent took the listing and then disappeared on me. I know that going in, and I know that that's the public persona of who we are as realtors, which isn't true because a lot of us are very hardworking and try to be very good at what we do. But it's if we can go in and start tackling those things while selling the solution, you can win a high level of your listing presentations simply by being there. So hope this was helpful. Let me know what questions you got. Let's do a little Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So if you guys have questions,
That
you know,
mic
feel
clap.
free. Yeah,
I'm
mic
gonna
clap
do
that
mic clap,
for
quick
sure.
mic clap.
Yeah, so if you guys have questions, drop it in the chat. We'll try to keep this organized, you know, for everybody. And one question that I have, I'll just kick it off. So Chris, with the communication, you know, I know there's a lot of agents who take listings and then they're off to the new thing. All right, they're off to the next, trying to get that property sold. And when a property is not selling, okay, there's always a reason why. And I think one of the biggest things that agents don't communicate is why that property is not selling, which is why they don't pick up the phone and call on a weekly basis to have that check-in. So how would you coach an agent or explain to an agent, like, here's a tough conversation that you need to have weekly, here's what you should do?
Well, and that actually will become a very much a real conversation within the next year. We're going to go back to a very normal market. And the public is usually about 6 months behind what we're seeing in the industry. They just are. All they know is what the neighbor told them or what's reported in the news. So they have this impression that, well, last week this sold. Well, that doesn't mean it didn't shift in the market now. So it keeps me very intentional to walk in integrity with what I told them I would do. And I think it's very important that we do have a marketing plan that we are implementing. Because if I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm very hesitant to make that call. When I know I've done everything I know to do, and we have pushed it, and I have the proof going, okay, here's how many impressions we had here. Here's how many clicks we had here. This is how many times the website got hit. Look at all the pages. People are seeing the property. So guess what? It's one other thing, price, right? I just have to be able to pull up the market data to be able to show them that, right? And so I'll keep wearing them down if I have to for 2-3 weeks to get that thing priced correctly. But I think it starts with us as agents to make sure we're implementing at the level we need to implement. And then I can tell a seller anything at that point.
Yeah, I think the key thing there that I pulled out of that is that you know your numbers, right? You know your marketing stats. And if you're not tracking key statistics in terms of what it's doing in the market, how many showings you've had, how many hits on the website you've had, number of impressions through social, you don't really have anything to talk about. You're going off of a gut feeling, right? So that, you know, nobody wants to go to a seller and be like, well, I feel like we're doing a great job. Well, we're in a business, you know, feelings aside, you know, save those for the, you know, the family, right? They want to get their property sold. So your feelings don't matter in that regard. So I think that was the big takeaway for me. You know, I just wanted to reiterate that is like, know your numbers in it, know your marketing stats, and know what you're doing. And it goes back to that, you know, the marketing plan, right? It's 89, 29, 39, whatever it is. That's the checklist, right? And something in there is going to have a numeric value associated with it that you can pull back to say, hey, these are the impressions. This is the actual performance of the listing in the market. Here's why we're not getting any offers. And that goes even into the feedback, right? Hunting down agents who didn't leave a feedback on the showing, you know, calling them up. You know, how often do agents actually, if I think it was D. So D, you've had a property on the market 84 days, no offers. and it fell through. I'm sure there's a ton of agents who showed the property that didn't leave any feedback. You don't have to answer this, but like, did you call them? Did you try to get responses and try to get answers for the seller?
That does come back to the congruency and the trust factor. And here's the thing that I've noticed is not only will it generate more offers, even in a tough situation, or more referrals, excuse me, in a tough situation, because even if you are wrestling this thing down to the last day, the seller's like, man, these people were just relentless. They were all over it. And here's the other aspect of this. Part of my communicating is, here's what's happened this week. Here's the numbers. Here's the metrics. When I do all that and I show week after week after week, my conversations are flawless when it comes to lowering, because I've proven myself. And sellers that don't know what you're doing are always hesitant to lower. No, and I'm not pointing that towards you, D. It's just that you have to have that communication in play, because that's what builds trust. These people came in and told me they would communicate. And you know what? To my surprise, they actually communicated. I mean, I think people are more surprised by when you do what you're supposed to do versus how well you can sell the idea. And so that goes a long, long ways for generating both referrals and helping get the price lowered later. So what's the next question, Eric?
All right, so we have Quamber. He wanted to know if we're going to be sharing this. Yes, Quamber, we'll have this on our YouTube channel, so we'll send a link out once it's up on the YouTube channel to everybody who was at the webinar today. Julio said, can we give a sample of the top objections you encounter and a sample of your answers to those objections?
Well, tell me what yours are. So I tend to, and I don't mean to be facetious about that, Julio, I don't tend to get a lot. In fact, sometimes I'm a very intuitive individual. There are times I pull 2 or 3 pages out of this and I just sign the listing agreement. So I don't have to oversell because I do a good job setting it in advance. Like I send out my personal bio before I get there. I set expectations. I set appointments. I make sure I'm following through to the letter what I said I would do. And then I put about 5 to 10% over the top of that. But give me a couple of objections you get.
Well, thank you again for the presentation, but to be honest, this is my first year in and I've only had 2 listings and I won them both. And I'm under contract for my second one, but this is just me being proactive cause I know it's going to come. And so I didn't know if you, and I haven't had objections, but I didn't know if you, what are some of the common ones, but I mean, you just answered that. So it was just me being more proactive more than anything.
Being proactive will go a long ways because, again, sellers and buyers have the same 4 or 5 questions. If I answer it before I get there, the objection's usually gone. I'll tell you one that comes up frequently if you're working leads is, how much do you charge? If you answer that question on the phone, you are done. You will never get to the appointment. So here's how I do it. When I coach clients, I help set up their entire systems, marketing plans, everything. But I tell them that, listen, your lead source you get 100 leads in, you do not have 100 transactions. Your job is to filter through there and to get the phone to ring, to find the 5 to 10 that are in there that are serious about selling right now. Right. And so once I make that happen, all that phone call is designed to do is to get the appointment set. On that phone call, what I charge comes up every time. And I've had people go 3 to 4 layers deep on that. And, well, how much do you charge? That's a great question. We're going to go over all that at the appointment. And sometimes they double down on it. I can appreciate that. I promise you, I'm going to cover every bit of that. Usually it's dead right there. They just want to know you're going to answer the question. I've had people answer it 3 or 4 times. And so If they push it that hard, I'm going to simply say, Julio, I can appreciate all of that. I can understand your concerns. I have actually a whole menu of commissions. It's going to be based off the service you choose, and I will be happy to explain all of that at the appointment. Right? Because if I answer that, what happens? Well, I charge 6%. I charge 7%. Well, so-and-so said they do it for 1. You can't sell this on the phone. You have to avoid that. You got to answer it without answering it. And so you have to use that to get past that objection. That's usually the most common one. The rest of it is, what are you going to do to sell my property? And that has to come down to how well you present from here.
Right. Thank you.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Next question was, what is your average listing presentation time you spend with a new client? And do you work with your computer or bring it?
I will bring the listing agreement with me. My start to finish, I'm usually in and out of a house in 45 minutes. If you're there for 2-3 hours, with the exception of the little old lady, you will oversell it and not get the listing anyways. It's important to truly know, and that's why I started this out with know your disc profiles, right? If I have a high D type A personality, I know I better be 10-15 minutes early, and I better be very on top of my numbers, know my stats, and I better be able to get through this in 20 minutes and get out. If I have a C personality, which one of my testimonials was actually for an insurance agent in Northern California, and we mountain bike and all that together, but I knew like this guy was all over the data. I brought 25 pages of data with me. I had an answer for whatever he was going to ask. So you have to really base that on your people. But for the most part, from the point that I hit the sidewalk to the point that I am walking out with a listing agreement, it's 45 minutes.
Awesome. All right. Next one was, do you record their answers to your questions on the listing presentation during the listing presentation, or are those just topics conversation?
Yes. So when I'm dealing with all of this, I will, because one of the things I want to see that have them see me do is what? I'm trying to build trust. I want them to see me taking notes or writing things down. It's so important to me that I'm listening to them. And that's really what we're doing. It's more of a psychological thing for them. But how do we tailor what we're doing? And I promise you on this page here, what's going to take it to a level 10, they're going to tip the hat on something that's super important to them that you can use as a closing gift that's personalized. So I hope you can see, like, my mind just goes for days, and I will use the data on this one page in 10 different areas between start to finish. And it's how I generate the referrals I do.
Awesome.
But yes, I do record it as I'm going through it.
So this isn't a question, but I'm going to turn it into a question. How would you recommend dealing with a high D, high C personality?
Well, just like we were talking, high D, it's very punctual, very straight, very to the point. No offense to anybody. I know some people may hate him, some people may love him, but it's in his book and it's the way he operates. And that is, Donald Trump always had a rule. If you walked into his office, you had to say it in 10 words or less. That's a high D personality. If you do that with a high C, though, you will lose them. You have to come in with tons of data. You have to methodically help them go through that process mentally with a high C. So it's important to understand who's in front of you, because that tailors the same listing presentation. I just know I got to be much more on point.
Awesome. All right. Anybody else have any questions? Anything else?
Yeah. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Hey, how you doing, Chris?
Thank you so much for the time too. I think it was awesome. I wanted to just put out there, maybe this will be helpful, but something you said was the commitment to reaching out to folks, you
Yes.
know, every day, right? Reaching out and calling and getting, in front of people. So let me ask you this. What is the metric that you use, if any, a metric that you use for conversion for the people that you have around you? Kind of like, hey, or if you're coaching someone, what's the metric of growth or the statistic of conversion that would let you know that the person is trending to progress with converting leads?
More in the aspect of an agent.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So I still go back to the real estate tends to attract 2 of the 4 personality types, but I still kind of go back there. What I want to see is effort and commitment more so than results. It's like when a client refers me, I reward the behavior. I don't reward the outcome. Why? Because if I reward the behavior, they'll keep referring. If I only reward it when it works out, it feels shallow and kind of skipped over. So same thing with agents. One of the challenges we have as coaches is to ensure that people are following a plan. They're actually implementing a plan. The conversation I have when I start with agents is, listen, there's 2 things I cannot teach. Either you have passion and follow through, or nothing I teach will help you, right? I can put the best coach in the world in front of you. It won't happen. I've got a lady that I've been coaching for about 1.5 years right now. She's out in Maine. She's 62 years old. She's been in real estate for 20 years. She closed consistently year after year after year, $5 million. Okay, producer. She coached with me in the first 12 months. She went to $20 million. We overthink this as agents when really all it is breaking it down and keeping it simplistic. I train a lot on what we call HLAs, or highly leveraged activities. It's just consistent effort. Consistent effort will outweigh skill and outweigh shiny objects and everything else more than anything. So that's what I really look for. I want to see that an agent will take a plan that I've put down for them and just work it. And work it consistently. Don't be hot this week and off the next. So I will follow through to make sure that they're improving. If I've been with someone for 12 months and they've only increased 10%, maybe it's not the best fit for them. Every agent I've ever coached, we target 100% growth in their business within 12 months. If they can't hit that, then I don't want their money. Does that answer the question, Chris?
Love it. Absolutely. No,
Okay,
it was good. It was, I think that it's important for, everyone to hear that perspective. So there's, that kind of like, don't overcomplicate it, just
Right.
focus in, and I love that you said that HLAs, highly leveraged activities. That's fire.
All right. So I got one. So when you're at the listing appointment, you're bringing all the paperwork with you. Are you leaving that meeting with signed paperwork, or are you letting them think about it?
Always try to leave with it. The one time that don't work is with the high Cs. If you don't give them room to think through everything you just left them, you'll lose them, because they will feel pressured almost immediately. Not the case with S's, not the case with I's, and definitely not the cases with D's. I'll give you a little story. I am obviously a high A or type A personality. High D has always been a predominant trait of mine. And I had an Escalade a few years ago, pearl white, beautiful vehicle, sitting on 22-inch chrome wheels. I traded it in for a Honda Accord. And ain't nobody at the Honda dealership going to take you serious when you do that. And so I had it all set up, pre-negotiated everything. For a dealership, I got down there, the game started. I blew out of there. I was mad, and I was coming back up to Reno, and I pulled in the parking lot, and I looked over. There was this pearl white Accord, and I stood there, and the guy showed up, and he started talking to me. And I kind of cut him off after about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. Says, let's go drive it. And he gets in the car. We drove it. I wasn't in the car 5 minutes. I says, all right, get the paperwork ready. And we got done with that. I wasn't there 15 minutes. I bought the car. And I got back there and I says, you're one of the best salesmen I've ever met at a used car lot. What did you do? He says, I've took enough training to know within 2 minutes you were going to control this sale. All I had to do was get out of the way, right? It's the same thing. And so you've got to know how to read your people. I mean, it was I wasn't there 30 minutes, sold the Escalade, walked the Honda and left. I mean, it's the fastest car I've ever bought. He just knew, like he could tell by talking to me that was the case. And so high D's, they want to sign stuff and get out the front door. They don't have all day to listen to your stories. We got stuff to do, things to, get accomplished and places to go. I don't want to hear all that. You want to sit and chat, I'll buy a puppy, it's, I got things to do. And so that's just kind of it. But with C's, that's not the case. You really do have to kind of coddle them, let them think about it overnight. Just make sure going in, you've done what you needed to do to sell it. And the other two personalities, the I's and the S's, it might take me a few extra minutes. I may have to be a little bit more animated, especially with a high I. These are like your Oprah Winfrey's, your Jimmy Fallon's, your Jay Leno's. These are the very kind of dynamic out there. They want a little entertainment. Don't be boring in that presentation. But yes, I will always try to walk out with a listing agreement, with the exception of the high C. Sometimes I got to wait and have them do it the next day.
Got it. Good. Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're going to wrap up here. So Chris, where can everybody go to follow you? What is the best way to get a hold of you?
On Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. I don't have a lot of videos on TikTok, but Facebook's a great place to go. Just look up my name. It's under Christorpher Raynor. Same thing with Instagram. Instagram might be under Raynor Real Estate.
Good. Yeah, guys. Everyone, so go follow Chris. Message him if you guys have questions. Message me if you guys have questions. We're going to be doing more of these. So if you guys want to get, the advance notice, we have your information from the your information from the registration. We'll be sure to send out anytime we do another training. We'll send that out to you guys so you guys have advance notice on it. And thanks for everyone for coming. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and we'll be seeing you guys on the next one.